Hello and welcome to Rugby Thoughts episode 8 from DrivingMaul. I got asked by Mark on Twitter what some thoughts on the differences between Super Rugby and Aviva Premiership styles of play. So here we are, let's talk about it then. So what I thought I'd do is I would run through some of the reasons or the differences between the tournaments, so you can understand why there might be differences in play. And that it's not just about what's sort of more winning or better than the other. First up, Super Rugby is 20 weeks long with a 4-week international break. All the teams also get 2 bye weeks during the season, during the regular season as well. If you take the Aviva Premiership, their season is 38 weeks long when you add in the Aviva Premiership, the LV Cup and the European Rugby Champions or Challenge Cup. So that's an extra 18 weeks. Now, some players do get rests during the LV Cup, and it's more of a sort of development tournament, but it's still 18 extra weeks long. So the strain on players is definitely greater from a playing time point of view. It'd be really interesting to see a comparison of sort of percentage of starters or percentage of core players or percentage of numbers of different players, difference between the two tournaments. But my guess is that the Aviva Premiership has less of their first choice players playing most of the time. The flip side to this is the travel, and the travel definitely takes its toll in Super Rugby, as we saw in the playoffs this year with some of the teams. A lot of research and effort has gone into figuring out how to travel in Super Rugby, and that includes the use of sleeping pills, which have been misused in the past by some players as well. So there are some. There's a lot of work being put in to try and minimise that, but it's definitely an issue. In Europe, they don't. They're not away from home for those length of time. It doesn't disrupt their training and recuperation in the same way that does Super Rugby. There are the exceptions, such as Connacht's trip to Russia last year, which was quite an onerous trip, and also playing in some crazy cold temperatures. But on the whole, they're on a coach back after the game and sleeping in their own beds, rather than sort of finding a hotel room and flying and not being able to train or recuperate properly. Next, let's talk about the players available to the teams. There are 12 teams in the Premiership compared to 5 or 6 teams per country in Super Rugby. So does this mean that the talent is more spread in the Aviva Premiership? I guess the flip side to that is that England has more registered players than any other country. Does that mean they have a deeper well of talent, or more talented, or more players of a talent level? I'm not sure. Even with the players that have been brought in externally, my guess is that the talent is more spread out in the Premiership. The amount of talent available per team is at a lower level there. So those 3 factors aren't normally talked about when we're talking about the differences, but the 2 that are often talked about are relegation and weather. So yes, relegation, let's go over that one first. This does mean that certain teams are more afraid to lose than they are looking to win games, as it were, and are fighting it out for losing bonus points as much as winning games. But this is normally restricted to 2 or 3 teams, so you can't really blame the whole mentality and the whole playing style of the division down to those. And if we look at Super Rugby, there are normally 2 or 3 teams who are poor and know they're going to lose anyway. So in that category, you've got generally the Force, the Cheetahs, the Blues until this season. The Lions have been down there before as well. And this season obviously had the Sunwolves and the Jaguars and the Kings. These teams, so I think both leagues do have sort of poorer teams, and so those in the Premiership will try and grind out some sort of points, whereas in Super Rugby they might try a bit more expansive and at least have a go. The big one is weather, and yes, and this is real. New Zealand years ago realised that that they needed to make sure they had good surfaces for their players to play on. Generally in wet weather, it's not so much the catching and passing, even though that is harder, and there may be some of the longer passes and the occasional drop ball. But in reality, the real problem is when a player can't trust his footing, where he can't step a player, where he can't sort of make a break as quickly. And so in New Zealand, they made a big effort to make sure they had decent pitches for all of their top grade rugby. And we're seeing that come through in England too now. So Twickenham has got a hybrid pitch. Exeter also has a hybrid, Deso hybrid pitch. The Wasps now have a different style of hybrid pitch, and I believe Gloucester and either, I can't remember if it was Saints or Tigers are putting ones in this summer. Then you've got obviously Saracens with the Trendsetters with a 3G pitch, followed about a year or so later by the Falcons, Newcastle Falcons, and Worcester Warriors are putting in a different style of 3G pitch. So more than half the pitches now in the Premiership are either hybrid or 3G, so which means that you won't be ending up with mud bath games as often as we used to have. And that definitely impacts the way teams play. One of the teams there that actually you think of as an attacking team is Harlequins, but they obviously look after their pitch, even though it's a traditional pitch, to a good standard. So you're really only looking at the team in Bath, notorious for having a bit of mud bath, but they're looking at upgrading their stadium, and I would expect that would come with a better pitch. And also Saints and Tigers, and not so unsurprising that I remember one of them was changing because they also have had poor pitches in the past. So with the better footing, with the fact that we've gone to playoffs now, and playoffs are generally in May, you are seeing a different change in coaching philosophy in the Premiership. So Harlequins were probably the first to do that, and won a Premiership with a good style of play. But you're seeing Exeter and Wasps going down that route as well. Saracens can turn it on when they want to, and Tigers were definitely much better attacking play last season with a new coach coming in as well. So I think the intent of coaches and of teams in the Premiership has improved, and that's what's been one of the big differences with Super Rugby, is that the intent has been there for years now, and the Premiership is catching up. And it is a matter of catching up. The speed of rugby in the Premiership is still slower than in some Super Rugby games. But then again, you don't think of South African rugby outside of the Lions as being quick, fast-paced, attacking rugby. They do. So I think it's one that's perhaps the difference is perhaps more perception than reality. I think, or at least the difference is bigger because of perception than the reality of the difference, and that you are seeing the Premiership sides changing their intent, getting the infrastructure in place so they can do it, and actually playing a much more offloading, hands passing style of rugby, and that the pace of the game between the two leagues is getting much more similar. Anyway, let me know your thoughts below, and also do subscribe to the weekly DrivingMaul newsletter so that you don't miss any of my videos or posts. And if you have any other questions, please do put them in below or catch me on Twitter, and I'll do my best to answer them. Cheers, guys.